Reporting by the Journal de Montréal has revealed an explosion of property repossessions brought to Quebec's housing tribunal. Since 2020, almost 14,000 landlords have taken tenants to the tribunal, the TAL, seeking an eviction on the grounds that either they or an immediate family member would occupy the unit. That's more repossession cases in the last 5 years than in the 10 years before that, according to the Journal de Montréal. And these are just the repossession cases that were brought before the TAL, so the true number is unknown. The number of fraudulent repossessions is also unknown, but a few such cases have come up in media reports this week. Quebec has had a 3-year moratorium on evictions since 2024, but only for evictions due to change in use, subdivisions, or expansions, not repossessions. The CAQ, a tenant advocacy organization grouping together the province's housing committees, is calling for the moratorium to be renewed after it expires in 2027 and for it to include evictions caused by repossessions. Meanwhile, a new report on the CAQ government's housing policies found that program reforms have made it more expensive to build subsidized housing, which has led to smaller units being built and little impact for housing affordability in the short term. In 2022, the CAQ replaced the provincial program that funded social and community housing construction with a new program that shifted the focus to affordable housing construction, which is tied to market costs rather than tenants' income. Now, 4 years later, we're seeing the impacts of that change. Most of what's built through this quote-unquote affordable housing program isn't affordable for low-income Quebecers, the report found. In fact, the government and developers are betting that since these units are built and managed by nonprofit organizations, the rents will increase more slowly than the private market and become affordable in 15 to 20 years. The report's authors, however, aren't so certain that's a safe bet.
Are you excited about affordable housing in 15 to 20 years?
Yeah. So this is an idea called deferred affordability. And
it's a deferred solution.
That's literally what it's called, abordabilité différée. And this is like the kind of the big concept that the provincial government is leaning on in its like provincial housing strategy that the CAQ put forward. I want to say in 2022, it might be 2024. But and this is like most of these units that are being built through this program will not be affordable when they're delivered.
So if you're like a single mom with 2 kids and you're struggling, like your kids will have to basically be graduated from high school before you can get Yeah. Wow.
And then, but also, you know, these units will probably be already occupied when.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't. And so basically, what this report found is that the programs that the CAQ has put in place have little to no impact for the short term. Which, you know, it's great that, you know, maybe that's the
Yeah.
thing. Maybe we'll have affordable units in 15 to 20 years. Most of the units will not be affordable when they're delivered. Yeah.
I guess this is what happens when you elect a government that spent its first 4 years in office denying there was a housing crisis, despite massive evidence that there was.
Yeah.
And that during their second term, the housing minister for a while was someone who, there were comparisons to Marie Antoinette, just let them eat cake. She was asked, what is the solution for people who can't afford rent increases? They should invest in real estate.
Yeah.
I suppose that's like this is widely seen as like the landlord landlord government.
Mm-hmm. Well, so when they created this new program, the Programme d'habitation abordable Québec, the FAQ, we call it for short, it was to come replace Accès Logis. Accès Logis was a one-stop shop to get funding, to have social housing projects built, and also purpose housing, like the purpose-built housing, housing for people who are leaving homelessness, housing for women leaving violent situations, stuff like that, and the reason Accès Logis was not perfect, but it did fund, I think, like 41,000 units in Quebec in its existence. They replaced it with the FAQ, and the point of the FAQ was to stop building social housing and to get the private sector more involved in building affordable housing.
Yeah.
Affordable is always
ends well, right? The private sector gets involved.
Yes.
They have no ulterior motives.
And you know, I think that people kind of are aware of this, but it bears repeating that the like affordable housing is a misnomer, right?
Yeah.
Because when the reason we call it affordable housing is that it's tied to the market. It's worth a certain percentage of the going rate on in the market.
And like the market in the last 10 years has doubled.
Yeah.
Our salaries haven't doubled,
Yeah.
right? Our services haven't doubled,
Exactly.
but the market has doubled.
So when you tie affordability to the market and the market is unaffordable, you're not actually guaranteeing affordability. That's kind of the problem that we have here.
They can die slower, but
Yeah.
you're not going to thrive.
Yeah. And so the point of this was to have more private funding and less state funding,
To like
right?
lessen the burden of the state.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you could also make the argument that, well, if we're spending so much percentage of our income on rent, then we're not fueling the economy by buying shit we don't need. So, or buying stuff with disposable income. So it kind of just defeats itself, I think. I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
You were talking about repossessions earlier at the TAL. So a repossession is when it's like one of the only ways you can evict someone now is other than for non-compliance with rent and whatever, is to say my uncle needs a place or my dad needs a place to stay.
Yeah. Immediate family member.
Yeah, so it has to be a child or a parent or maybe a sibling. But this is not happening. Like, this is not what a lot of these are fraudulent. Can you explain some of what you've seen?
Yeah, I wish that we had like numbers. Unfortunately, we don't, but we do, like, anecdotally, I've certainly heard it before. And then after the Journal de Montréal report came out, there's been a few stories in the media. There was one in the Journal de Montréal that was interesting, and it was like a family 2 years ago, a couple and their daughter. They were evicted from their home that they had lived in for 10 years. And the reason that was given by the landlord was that his daughter was going to live in the unit. So it was a repossession. 10 days after they moved out, they saw the unit listed, like advertised as available for rent for $500 higher rent than they were paying. So they were able to take their landlord to the TAL, and the TAL ruled in their favor. That landlord paid $17,000 in a fine. And so this is a case where, you know, the tenants were able to, you're able to get compensation. You don't get the right to return to your unit. But, you know, in these situations, the onus is on the tenant to prove that the repossession was fraudulent. In this case, it was very apparent, right? They had the proof. Obviously, the daughter was not living in the unit if it's advertised as available for rent.
If you're going to lie, be a little more subtle about it, okay?
Yeah,
wait 2 months instead of one.
Exactly. This one was
10
very...
10 days, wait 11 days.
It was very blatant, but a lot of them, I would say, probably most of them are not, so it's probably a lot more subtle and a lot harder for a tenant to prove, and the onus is on the tenant.
Well, look, I was in a situation where my landlord asked us for an illegal security deposit. We were desperate to find a place at the time. You know, we had a young kid, and, well, we still do. And so you give the security deposit thinking, like, I'll get it back. And, of course, when I moved, not getting it back, yay, thank you so much, Mr. Landlord. And you are so swamped by life, and you're thinking, like, is it worth it? Is it worth the aggravation? Do I want to go fight the guy in court? And I didn't think I was going to do this, but I let it slide. I thought it's not worth it. I have too much on my plate. I don't want to fight it. And I think most people, or a lot of people, are in that situation. And then the government knows this, and they kind of let it happen because, again, it lowers the burden of the state. We don't have to do as much. We don't have to get as involved. And ultimately, are we serving the people, or are we serving the landlords? And I think we have long served the landlords. Yeah.
I mean, so who unfortunately tends to vote in elections? It tends to be property owners. Yeah. People who are university educated. People who, are landlords, and not people who live in social housing. Yeah. It tends to be, right?
Well, it's extremely aggravating.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, you know, we talk about in Quebec having rent control and having good laws to protect tenants, which is true, actually. Like,
in theory.
Yes. Like, you compare it to Ontario, and yes, the laws are better. The big problem for tenants, it's a problem for tenants, it's not a problem for landlords, is that there is like little
almost no enforcement.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yay.
So it is very, very easy for, you know, a fraudulent repossession to be done without any repercussions for the landlord. Same thing with raising the rent above what is allowed. You know, the case that I was talking about, In the reporting, it notes that in the new tenant's lease, the Section G of the lease was not filled out. Section G of a lease is what our rent control measures rest on, right? It's the place in the lease.
You could argue it's the most important section of the lease.
For enforcing rent control, certainly, absolutely. And it's the part where the landlord has to write the lowest rent that was paid for that unit in the previous 12 months. So that landlord had not filled out the lease, the Section G of the lease, right? And that's the thing. It's very easy to not fill it out. It's very easy to fill it out with a not the real number, right?
Yeah.
Technically speaking, tenants can go to the TAL and fight it if they find out that it's not the case. But,
the onus is on them.
Yeah, and there's a reason why tenants don't want to, because there's a lot of discrimination against tenants who go to the TAL, right? It's harder to find another place after.
I think I'll wrap this with one thought, and it's that we can do rent subsidies, which are really just a way of paying landlord with taxpayers' money, or we can do social housing. And I think social housing generally is that's really the only option to create consistent, affordable housing. Thank you so much.